Welcome to the Bank Marketing Show, the podcast that engages and informs you for success in today's marketplace. It's the show that will make you a better marketer with trends, tactics, and inspiration from experts and industry leaders. If you're wanting to impact your personal success and position your bank as the best choice in your market, you're in the right place. Now let's dive into today's show with your hosts, Chris and Dan.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bank Marketing Show. We're glad to have you guys, our listeners and watchers, with us. And Dan, great to be with you today.
Yeah, same here. Good to see you again.
Absolutely.
We keep doing these, and I think people keep coming back and listening.
So we'll do the quick plug here to if you're a follower and listener and find value out of this, be sure to go and subscribe to the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. And that said, you make a good point, Dan. I mean, we're several years into this, and our subscribers and listeners continue to build and grow. So it's really great to know that hopefully we're serving well and providing some value for you folks. So appreciate you being with us.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, great one. We're going to dive into today that's not a specific topic that I don't think we've covered in quite some time. So looking forward to the conversation around this.
Yeah, I've been chatting with a few folks in my network the last couple of weeks and starting a new project at my company. And just one of the themes that keeps coming up in these conversations is around financial education for your customers and why it's important, what customers want out of it. And so, we thought that would make a great episode here today.
What I like about this with financial education, Dan, is it fills lots of important slots. I mean, one of them, quite simply, is content. So for your social, your blogs, on your website, all the, many places. We even have clients that still do like print rack cards, about different financial education topics. So it can even be traditional print like that. So it fills lots of content, possibilities and voids, in doing that. So that's one.
It's, so much of what we espouse on this show is people don't want to follow banks. It's not exciting. Nobody wakes up and says, well, what is my bank doing today? And so in any of your content and any of your marketing or advertising, you've got to provide some kind of value, some sort of reason for people to want to read the thing that you're putting out, a reason to engage with the bank. It's not that you shouldn't post fun things going on at the bank. You should. It builds personality. It goes towards loyalty.
And your people and all of that. Absolutely.
And your people, yeah. But, I think it's, those are kind of quick hit things. And if you're really trying to do a blogging strategy, you're doing an email strategy, the thing that people want from their banks is education. Help me be better. Help me be smarter with money. Help me save for my goals.
There you go.
And, it's, you can't just say, we help you save for your goals, right? But you can create content that helps people do that. Helps your customers, right? If you pick any financial education topic, there's probably 10,000 blogs already written about that. Saving for your first home and what is an ARM versus a fixed rate mortgage, that type of stuff. There's a million articles like that already. But what questions your customers ask you and ask the bank. And you can answer those, in an educational way. And that's
right. And wouldn't it be great if your customers, your audience, your community are not having to go elsewhere to read a great blog about, tips for a first-time home buyer or whatever the case. Yeah, so they're out there, but that means if you're not doing it, then they're going elsewhere for that content.
Yeah, most banks are not doing this, right? But the bank rates and rocket mortgages, the big national institutions do a lot of this. They have big, SEO and content teams, and they churn out a bunch of articles. But it's another spot. We've especially the last couple of episodes of the show, we've talked a lot about but you can do these same things that the big guys do in a much more local way. Yep. And I think this is another example. Don't just don't just ChatGPT an article around the, arm versus fixed. Like, figure out ask the tellers, figure out what questions your customers ask you, and write an article about them, or a short,
and for your areas, if your bank covers this part of a certain state or whatever, pay attention to, right, what are your customers, the profile of your audience, because of geography or because of whatever it is. What is it that they need? I mean, everything from, has there been a natural disaster in your state, within the last couple of years? And so is financial preparedness around that is that a real thing? So that can be an example. I actually had a bank client doing that with what happened in the Carolinas, with hurricane stuff last year and all of that. And they're like, hey, we're not coastal, or the inner parts and where there was so much damage. They're like, we've never really thought about that kind of stuff for our audience. But boy, it became real. So, it's those types of things, or whether you're Midwestern and you're talking to ag customers, so financial education, I love your point there, Dan, is not just about just totally general broad stuff, but pay attention to what provides that value for your audience, audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And write it from the perspective of a person that customer might meet when they come into the bank, because that's make it have the personal touch, right?
There you go.
So, and all of this, right, I think we're trying to sell the point of financial education here, but it's building trust, right? It's building trust, loyalty through valuable content that people want to engage.
Yeah.
And, an ag customer in the Midwest is going to need something different than an ag customer in the Northeast. And, the bank knows that. So if you can write an article, not just saying we do ag or we know this, but it's here's a situation that came up for this farmer in this particular state, and we were able to help them solve it. It's back to, like, our last episode was on storytelling. So it's back to that, but you can educate as you're storytelling. And, if somebody comes to you with an issue, it's likely that a lot of other potential customers have, a similar thing.
Love that. Storytelling, case studies, all of those things. So, Dan, I know that today we're going to talk a little bit here initially, a little more about the why around financial education, and we're going to get into delivery channels and audiences and partnerships and lots of other things that I think are going to be really important around this topic. But I love that we're starting with this. One of the things that we profess as an agency for banks is that, banks are a pillar of the community. I was riding home from work yesterday, country song comes on, and it's kind of a small town setting in a country song, and it's talking about taking a left at the bank as you go through town. And I'm like, okay, I mean, it literally brought up this vision of the bank, so you know what I'm saying? It's in this community, and that's what a community bank should be.
Mm-hmm.
It should be the bank. Even if you're in a larger metro area, it should still be very much around that. So who better to provide financial education than the bank? And it speaks into what a community bank really is as a pillar and providing value to its community.
Yeah, people look to you.
Exactly.
So fill that gap, because otherwise somebody else online will.
There you go.
And so I think we can. There's a number of different ways. I keep mentioning blogs and articles and stuff, and there's social content. But there's a number of different ways you can do this. And we've had some guests on that have talked about bringing experts in and doing those types of things. So that it doesn't have to just be an article, right? I think, like anything else, you want to have a way of getting the great ideas from the frontline staff of what this should be, right? And understanding, what questions you get asked, what kind of customers you want to drive in to the bank, and think about what information those customers need. What do your loan officers wish people knew before they called? What are your real differentiators with competitors, and not just competitor banks, but what are people's alternatives, right? An alternative might not be another bank. It might be sticking the money under the mattress. Right?
Yeah.
So you could think of an article of like why you shouldn't do that.
Right.
So think a bit about the target customer, and when you get to that right level, ideas will start coming, and those ideas can be what the topic is, but then you should start thinking about the delivery channels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this an article, or is it an article plus something else? So we can go through a couple examples and thoughts here, but one is I see a lot of banks doing workshops, doing classes, and that can be
probably for specific audiences, not just inviting the community, but for realtors or for
right. So think about that audience first, right? If you want to drive first-time home buyers, do a social hour, right? First time home buyer information session, and give some drinks and some cookies, and you'll get some people in, make some build some relationships. You can talk about saving. You can talk about the different types of mortgages, the things like property tax that they'll need to know about that are very specific to your area, right? And that's where it's like the Rocket Mortgage isn't going to write an article about property tax in St. Louis County. Yeah. Right. It's going to be much more general, but those details.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, and another great way to do this, I love the workshops idea, but the beauty of the digital world, Dan, that we now live in, is there's so many different ways, even outside of just social, or utilizing on social and blogs and all of those things. You and I were talking about it before we started, but even like bite-sized videos. So this can be, a lender, talking about something and keep it bite-sized, or one of the bank executives or a CSR or someone like that, so you can use your internal team. And then as we go forward here in a little bit, we're going to talk more about some really great partnership ideas, but pulling those in, but, doing those recordings on digital, and then, looking at offerings with digital, such as calculators or quizzes or things that, you're driving traffic to your web, which is a home base for this kind of resource and interactive stuff. Those are great ways to do that. Yep.
Well, and one of the things I recommend banks trying to get into this is like, you could sit down with, it can be hard to get time with lenders. They're not incentivized to like push out content on the bank's page. They want to bring in leads. They want to make calls and hit the streets, as it were. But if you can get 15 minutes, you can sit down, turn on a camera, turn on your phone camera, ask them 5 or 10 questions, have them give rapid fire answers. That can turn into an article, right? Feed the transcript to ChatGPT. It'll write 10 blogs from that. Yep. Chop up that video into 10 different, that just having them answer one question, post once a week on their LinkedIn page. Turn those questions into a newsletter series of, here's our first-time home buyer. If you're a first-time home buyer, sign up for this first-time home buyer newsletter. We'll walk you through the next 6 months of your home buyer journey, and every month you get another question answer. There's all kinds of
tips from our pros to you.
But all from a 15-minute sit down with that with that lender. You can turn that into a ton of content, and then if you think, great, we'll sit down for 15 minutes with each of your lenders. You can easily get months, if not longer,
there you go,
of content from that.
Well, and sometimes if it's harder to get those people in for a workshop, like you were talking about too, another great way to do it too is a webinar. So that's a little more of a long channel, but obviously you can record it. So if it's specific around a certain topic, then it's something that other team members, can utilize. Hey, let me send you a link to this on our site. While you're considering whatever, buying a farm equipment or starting a new business, or buying real estate. Hey, we've got a great, one of our folks did a webinar a couple of months ago. Let me send you the link to it. Or
edit it down, make clips.
Make clips.
Right.
Yep.
You've got the whole thing. And right, the clip can be the lead magnet that gets posted on LinkedIn. Hey, check out the answer to this question. Hey, if you want the full webinar, email us. We'll send you the full webinar.
Yep. Well, and the point of that, using your example of first-time home buyers, you're like, oh, that's only a small snippet of people or whatever. Well, no, because you're permanently going to have that content. So, and if everyone on your team is aware that, hey, we've got that content that we can refer people back to, or I can send a link to them, or, you get an inquiry, or you can share it with realtors that they can share with their customers about tips for first-time home buying, and it's all from the bank, Yeah. So, I mean, this is really kind of
and you could
dynamic opportunity for marketing.
Go further. I mean, a lot of banks get leads from, get their mortgage leads from realtors.
Yep.
So create content for the realtors, like why you should go to a community bank. We approve faster. We know the area. We have more flexible pre-approvals, stuff that the realtor will see and say, "Oh, great! This bank's going to help me do this faster."
And
think about the realtor
stuff they can give to their customers. That helps them to be more valuable.
Yeah. What are the 5 things your customer, a video for realtors on? What are the 5 things your customer should have before they apply for the mortgage?
Right. Like pre-approval, this, that, as you're going through just the looking process. Yeah, all those things. Yep.
Yeah. So if you're saving the realtor time and collecting that information for their clients, then they're gonna come back to you. So, and you all probably listening might have some good relationships with realtors, know what they, know kind of how they operate, but ask them, how can we save you even more time? Can we create a brochure that you can give to your customers, those types of things. But then as you're doing that, like think about how to chop it up and make it social content, make it website content.
There you go. And one of our constants on this podcast, Dan, is always about brand and is always about, what is it? So as your brand has its identifiers and its own brand voice about who you are, these are such great opportunities to speak into that. So we're using, realtors as an example and first-time home buyers. But again, this can speak into whatever your area of specialty is. If it's a certain type of depository accounts, who are those for? Drilling into, it's not for our community, it's for these people. Well, create this financial education content, whether it's the webinars, the workshops, or some of these different things that we're talking about, Dan, and speak specifically to that audience through these platforms and channels that we're talking about. Yep.
Yeah.
Not just to people in general, right? Because again, that's what Chase is putting out. That's what Rocket Mortgage is putting out. That's what is just to people in general. Well, that's not who you are as a community financial institution. Speak to your people.
Yeah. Build for an audience of one. Think about a customer.
Love that.
Build content for them, replay a recent conversation and build content around that. And it'll apply to far more than one customer.
Yep.
If you're very focused on that, what that farmer in your town needs, what that first-time home buyer in your town needs, because a first-time home buyer in New York City is much different than a first-time home buyer in a rural community. The home prices are different. The jobs that they have are different. The incomes that they have are different. Their plans to stay in the area long-term might be different. So the products that fit best for them might be different. So it's all, think about what that specifically means for your area.
Yeah.
And
I mean, when and why to teach your kids about saving and managing money. And to your point, that's different for rural versus urban also. And it's kind of a different, it's a little different mindsets and different types of communities and those types of things. So speak to parents very specifically about kind of the parenting style that's more predominant in your area, whether that's starting them younger or waiting till they're older, whatever the case may be, that those are things that are valuable to those people as parents. Not a specific age, zip code demographic, but speak to Bob or Susie that is a parent that wants to teach their kids about money, and that type of thing to get them in to open up a student checking account. So, those are the kind of things to really pay attention to. So,
yeah.
Well, Dan, we've kind of briefly mentioned a couple of times about partnerships, and I think this is a huge part of this financial education topic, or some of the opportunities here. So, what were some of those that came to mind for you?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is you can do the workshop or the social hour in your bank and hope to bring people in, or you can go out and go elsewhere, and that's really what we mean. What the type of partnerships we mean here is, instead of doing what kids need to know about saving session on a webinar in your bank, go to a school.
Yep.
Right. A lot of banks already do this type of stuff, but school that you sponsor, right? The next sponsorship renewal, I see a lot of banks negotiating kind of on those sponsorships. So great, we're going to sponsor the scoreboard, but we want to be able to come in and do a workshop for the fourth graders every year, and and hand out materials for the fourth graders to give to their parents, and that those types of things. So do figure out what that is, right? And maybe school doesn't mean fourth graders; it means college, depending on what's in your community. Means the big tech high school could mean a lot of different things, but probably in your community there's something where you can create that. So get out, go in the go into the school, make it a fun activity.
Yep, there you go. That's a great one.
Yeah, I still remember getting the little bags of shredded money and that type of stuff, from the bank that came in when I was in school, and so you can do a lot of memorable things that way.
Yeah,
and you're doing financial education as you go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, another great one, Dan, too, is employers, companies.
Yeah.
In my agency with our 15 folks is certainly this case, but every company these days is trying to create culture and value for their teams, and providing opportunities for financial education for your teams, or for teams, for companies, is a great way just to have a no cost, low barrier to entry, something for companies to provide for their employees. Great way to do that, whether it's flyers or doing what you're talking about, which is the bank going out and doing workshops, those types of things, depending on the company, and really kind of the sky's the limit for ways to do that. And it's something cool that a company can offer to its folks. It's not costing the company anything, especially if the company are really good customers of the banks.
Yeah.
It's deepening that relationship also.
Yeah. I mean, and that can take a lot of different forms of retirement planning, of bring the first time home buyer thing. People get their, their first job, and they start thinking about that type of stuff. So, think about who's at that employer. That can be different. A lot of rural communities exist because of a single big employer. And if you're in one of those communities, you're already well aware of that employer and have, either have a presence there or trying to get in there. But a lot of banks I see think about we got the ATM. We got an ATM in the hospital in town, or the big employer in town. But think about what else you can do, right?
Yeah.
Bring the workshop there. See if you can get a flyer in the new employee packet that they get.
Yeah.
And so, that can apply to stuff other than employers too, right? Nonprofits, there's a different form of sort of money management that happens at nonprofits, and a lot of them are very small and don't have time. So, what are the things you can provide that add value? Education, or the service add to them, fundraising, those types of things, right? Yeah. It's going to depend on what's in your community. What are the things in your community that need that kind of help?
Well, and that brings to mind also, Dan, one of the things that we haven't talked about yet, it also is compliance, and what is around this whole topic of financial education. And there may be a few listeners that are kind of and makes the hair on the back of their neck stand up, go, oh well, we have to be careful from a compliance standpoint. But once you're sure that you're playing well within compliance as it should, then there are opportunities here, and you mentioned nonprofits, around checking boxes for CRA. And some of the other things that can be really important to regulators, and it's positive community relations and PR, and so even under the masthead of financial education, a nonprofit partnership can mean lots of different things, including involvement from your team in a nonprofit and those types of things. So yeah, banks giving away snacks and things, and just there's so many possibilities.
Yeah, or do I align with the nonprofit's mission, right? If it's a housing community service nonprofit, maybe see if there's a build your credit type of workshop you can offer to their customers, like that. Align it to that, and you'll find it's that getting down to that individual customer level, and you'll find lots more opportunities.
Absolutely. Well, one of the questions here, Dan, I know around this also is, yes, this is all great, and it's kind of a big B brand level when you talk about financial education. So a lot of bank leadership is going to want to know, how do we measure this? How does it attribute to growth? Because at the end of the day, a bank is a business, and you're trying to it's either around retention or accessibility to new audiences and new customer growth, again, depository or loan or whatever the case may be. So what are some thoughts, Dan, around turning this education into how is it measurable?
Yeah, I think that's a big area. We should probably do another episode on just measuring ROI of stuff like this. But
yes,
just the quick hit for this episode, I think, is just, as you're setting these things up, right? Like, there's a couple different ways to track. You can obviously track, the easy thing to track would be attendance at a workshop, at a thing. And attendance in the digital form could mean the number of visitors to that blog page, the number of, impressions that a post or an ad, a social ad got.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that big metric of how many eyeballs did we get on this thing.
Yep.
There's different levels of value, right? An in-person attendee to a workshop is much different than somebody who watched a 10-second video online.
Or webinar watches.
Yeah.
Those types of things. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you, something like a Facebook event allows you to track, set up a way to do RSVPs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have an RSVP list, one, it's a measure of interest in the workshop, but two, it's also a potential marketing list, right? You can say, and everybody's probably signed up for one of these, but it's like, great, you attended, here's some follow-up information. Hey, it looks like you missed this event. Here's a recording.
There you go.
And you can get them in a mini newsletter and send out, all these education snippets we were talking about earlier in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
So there's ways to there's ways for any of these things we're talking about to turn into an ongoing conversation. So in terms of like tracking ROI, it's one thing to count the number, but I think what most banks are looking for is like 6 months later, what did this turn into?
Yeah.
It takes people a long time to open an account. So immediately we can track viewership, attendance,
mm-hmm.
but likely people aren't immediately signing up for an account. Hey, this was a great webinar. Let me just open an account.
Sure.
It probably won't happen. You might get a couple, but more likely it's you're building trust. And a few months later, they come back when they've saved up and they're ready to buy the first home.
There you go. And that building trust, again, is the big B brand level. It's not always specific conversions as to how many accounts did we open this afternoon after the workshop. It's probably not that hard sell conversion, but it is that there are numbers that you can put around these things. That's right. And try to track that and follow that down the road.
And it's really think about customer lifetime value, right? Because it's like I hear a lot from banks of, we did this $300 to open a checking account incentive, and then everybody just closed their accounts, 3 months in once they got the bonus.
Yeah,
that happens all the time. So for these types of things, like the goal is to build more trust. And so it may take them longer to open the account, but when they do, they've got more trust and they've got more, loyalty to the bank. So you really want to be tracking over time, right? So if you probably want to define, right, a couple different strategic areas here. So if your bank's trying to drive first-time home buyers and ag loans, making that up, have a first-time home buyer list, have an ag loan potential list, and think of all the different ways you can reach them. And you can track that list, compare it to what's going on in your core over time. And that may be a manual process for a lot of banks, but check in it every 6 months and see who's opened accounts, see how much is in those accounts, see what activity they're doing at the bank.
Yep.
And it may not be perfect, it may not be exact, but it's enough to kind of give a picture of ROI to your leadership and show that this stuff is working. But it's a long time horizon.
It is. It is. And as long as not only marketing, but leadership understands that going into it, that this is not necessarily a conversions this afternoon approach, but it is crucial and it's enormously valuable internally and outwardly facing. So that I think you make a good point there, Dan, as long as that is understood conceptually, that's the point of this. But, it's branding of of very positive consequence.
Yeah.
And it's directly tied sometimes all the way through your brand into individuals in the bank.
Yeah. So I think it's just like when you're presenting the idea to leadership, to your team, it's like have a KPI in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Or say, hey, we're going to do this. We expect that in 6 months this will happen.
Yeah.
And go with that leading in and set the expectation that it's not, if your bank is in a spot of, we just need more deposits. We want to raise 3 million deposits in the next quarter. Workshop is not going to do that.
Yeah.
Not much will, right?
Yeah.
But, probably you're in fire mode and, you run a bunch of ads or something like that to just get those immediate conversions. But those aren't the high value, loyal customers that the workshops and education strategy will build.
That's right. Well, Dan, I know what we love to do is provide some specific takeaways, from these episodes. And as we were kind of teeing this up for today, we thought about some specific ones that are really related to the topic areas that we've covered, which is, so here's a good speaking of 90 days, here's a good 90-day challenge for you, for each of our listeners, is pick one topic, pick one channel, and pick one partner, that are ones that you haven't necessarily utilized before, for financial education. What is an important topic area, again, that is really specific to your key local audience. And I loved what you said about speak to one. Don't speak to the community, speak to one. And who is that? So pick that one, have a topic specific to them, a channel that is going to be reachable, usable for them, and then, and a community partner that you can use for that. So just pick those things. And then, as you say, get leadership's buy-in to that. And you've got a specific something to go and do that can provide lots of content and can be kind of a long run thing to do that's of value. Yeah.
Get good at creating the educational content and then repurposing it, chopping it up, using it on different channels, right?
Yeah.
And so many banks just say, oh, we've got to do this for 10 different types of customers. Okay, but you don't have to do them all at once. So pick one.
Yep.
And be solely focused on that one for the 90 days. And, you'll learn a lot, you'll grow it, and then you can add another one later.
Yep. Yeah, and so for you guys that are our listeners, one of the things that we'll provide in the show notes from this episode, you can go to bankmarketingshow.com and check it out on this episode, or even in the show notes, regardless of where you're listening to the podcast, that'll give you a specific checklist. Just a quick, simple checklist of how to do this and really get going at the next level with financial education, kind of utilizing all the different aspects and opportunities that we've talked about today.
Yeah.
So, well, good. Well, man, Dan, when we first started talking about financial education, you're kind of like, well, how do we really unfold this whole thing? And man, as we did, it turned into a lot that we covered today.
Yeah, you think about financial education, most banks think, well, do some blogs. But there's so much more you can do with it. So hopefully we've given you all like some food for thought and getting your gears spinning. And, I'd love to hear if anybody's going to take us up on the 90-day challenge there. Like, let us know what you're thinking, how that's going.
That's right. And Dan, I know that in all the banks that your agency and mine work with, we've got lots of specific use cases of some of our clients that are doing it well. So we want to encourage everyone, reach out to us. Contact at bankmarketingshow.com is an email that comes to Dan and I, and reach out to us through the website. And check us out on LinkedIn and the newsletters that Dan and I each have going on there as well. But connect with us, and you're thinking, well, help me flesh this out, or give me an example of how some other banks are doing this. We love sharing that kind of information. So reach out and connect with us.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
Super. All right, good stuff today, Dan. Appreciate it very much. Look forward to the next few episodes we've got coming up.
Yeah, talk to y'all soon.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us. To go deeper or get access to some of the valuable nuggets from today's show, go to bankmarketingshow.com. There you'll find episodes, links to resources, and much more. Be sure to subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. And join us next time.